I've never once questioned whether Kundalini is a bad process or whether it's dangerous. So it's quite surprising to hear that there is quite a lot of fear-mongering about that. I wasn't, I was a Christian when it happened to me, so at most I kind of questioned why it happened to me and what it was. And I think although I use the word Kundalini because it's a word that we can associate with and which people understand to be a form of energetic awakening or an awakening of spiritual gifts, it is recognized in Christian mysticism. I don't know a lot about it. It's not something I've researched, but I think there is at some point a kind of transcending of religion. So obviously there's lots of different religions in the world. There's a few main ones that we all know about, Christianity being one of them. But obviously there is a lot of teachings associated with Christianity, partly based on the Bible, partly based on tradition, partly based on culture, a lot based on beliefs, and beliefs are not fixed. People's beliefs change all the time throughout their lives. Some people change religion completely. It is just a belief. So you could think about the structure of an atom, for example, being as like a model which describes how things are made up at a very minute level. Well, religious beliefs can be like that as well. It's, if we think of it as just a model that helps us to understand something. So if you think of the story, for example, of Noah's Ark, it is a story about God's desire for man to be righteous and to behave in a certain way. And then because there were so many people on earth, as far as the story goes, who weren't righteous, he brought a huge flood and wiped out most of the population. Now, whether you believe that's a real story or not, that story is just illustrating something which everybody can understand, because stories have the power to do that, to take something quite complicated potentially and turn it into something which can be easily understood. The same as with an atom, it's like a model which is very simple, which anybody can understand. But actually, if you were to study atoms as a scientist, probably you would go down right into the depths and know that that model is way too simplified and there's a lot more depth to it. So that's the same way that I see religion. So Christianity, as an example, is based on a set of teachings which are simple to understand, but the more that you research, the more that you go into it yourself, the more that you understand it from an inner level, the more depth that it has, and the more you realize that that model is very simple and way too simplified, the more in-depth that you get with your own journey. So what I'm trying to say is that we have different religions, but I almost look at it as being like a ladder. I'll take Christianity because that's the religion that I followed. It's like I was following a religion to take steps up the ladder towards a goal. You could call that enlightenment, you could call it realization, whatever word. I mean, I was trying to get close to God. I wanted to practice developing a relationship with God, with the divine, as I now refer to it as. And reading the Bible and practicing as a Christian enabled me to take some steps up the ladder. But there comes a point where, in my mind, every religion has its own ladder, and all those ladders kind of reach the same point. So once you've got to a certain point, you realize that you don't actually need the ladder anymore because you've got to a point beyond the last rung of the ladder, and you can take it away. So just coming back to Kundalini then, I think there is some fear around Kundalini that it's maybe completely opposite to Christianity, nothing to do with it, or it's evil, maybe. Honestly, I have never ever questioned whether it is a bad force or if there's anything untoward about it, because that's just not been my experience. It does bring disruption. It does make you question a lot of things in life, including beliefs. As I just mentioned, I had a very strong Christian belief, which has totally fallen away, really. I do still read the Bible and I do still refer to the teachings, but I don't identify as a Christian anymore, although I do see Jesus as a teacher. I believe he set a very strong example for how to live life as a good person, how to connect to the divine, how to be, I guess he models the type of life that I want to live in terms of trying to get closer to God and trying to be a good person. But if you would read the Bible, you see lots of examples of people who lived godly lives. And I mean, if you go back to the Old Testament, obviously this is before Jesus' time anyway. So they weren't followers of Christ, yet they were connecting with God on a deep level. They were living a righteous life. So the idea that Christianity has to be this kind of rigid way of following certain beliefs and rejecting other beliefs, to me is very restrictive. And I think it's more to do with family culture, with wanting to follow a culture which has been set by our parents, maybe, or by our community, or by our church. But when you really start to want to go deep, you're going to have to find your own way of following your beliefs, because other people's beliefs are other people's beliefs at the end of the day. You can't follow what somebody else is doing to reach the same point that they have, because their personality will be different, their life experience, their culture could be different, the way they were taught. Even if you both associate as Christians, for example, the underlying beliefs could be completely different. There's obviously different denominations of Christianity. It's practiced differently in different countries. Some churches are different. If you went to a Baptist church in one town, it might be very different from going to a Baptist church in another town. It's a lot dependent on the preachers or the people in the church or whoever kind of has power in that situation as to what direction it takes and to what the teachings are. So I strongly believe that we can all develop a personal connection with the divine, with God, and that is the purpose of following a religion or being spiritual or having spiritual practices. But the idea that one religion is wrong and another one is right, to me, that's completely alien. It's a way of creating division, of causing hatred, really. And Christianity is all about love, right? God is love. So what place does hatred for another religion or an experience of the divine, what place does that have in Christianity? And why would people question that and try to enforce a certain way of thinking and reject a different way of thinking? I mean, obviously, one of the purposes of Christianity is to live a good life. And I can understand that people want to enforce that and to encourage that. But judging other people and saying, you know, who am I to say that I know better than somebody else? Who am I to judge? I mean, we know what Jesus said about judgment, that by the measure you judge, so you will be judged. So judgment to me has no place. And this is one of the things I'm struggling to kind of understand is somebody believes they're a very strong Christian, but then they're judging somebody that had a certain experience. Not necessarily because they had a spiritual practice, like yoga, for example. I mean, when I was a Christian, I was quite suspicious of yoga and other spiritual practices, and I thought maybe it was wrong. But because I had this spontaneous awakening, which had nothing to do with doing any of those spiritual practices, it's just something that happened to me. Although at the time I was praying for spiritual gifts and praying quite deeply in a very persistent way, which again was something I learned from the Bible, is to eagerly seek spiritual gifts. So that was something I was putting into practice to see where it would take me. So yeah, I just wanted to speak to the idea that Kundalini maybe is a bad thing, and just to say it's something that came up for me spontaneously, but I have never questioned that it is a benevolent process. To me, it's a process that can bring us closer to the divine if we allow it to, and it can bring up spiritual gifts, and it can make us completely open to other ways of thinking, to lose our ego identity, and just to make us overall better human beings. If this resonates with you, if you're interested in this idea, I'd be very interested to hear your comments, so please post in the comments box, and don't forget to like and subscribe.